Hi, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. Um, and we still have one day left. If anyone has a seethingly wonderful hot question, you can send one in. We have a few for the weekend, but always welcome to have a few more. It's very interesting how questions bunch together sometimes. Uh, some of the same ideas uh, become involved with um, people who are quite a distance apart and don't really communicate with each other. But that means that it's part of the growing process. We have questions that are similar to other people's questions, and but it's good that we attempt to inquire relating to ourselves uh, within, because it's all a part of growing materially or spiritually. And it's a key issue. Often, if we have reactions or responses, we don't necessarily have questions that go with them. And perhaps sometimes it's better to search for some questions that relate to those responses. For example, why am I responding like or feeling this way? Why am I this way or that way? It's okay. Uh, Normally, whether people admit it or not, we all have very similar responses to various things. Uh, and sometimes we just have similar responses to different things. Uh, Having a sense of humor about that is very important uh, to us in relationship to how we live life, as you all know. So I just had a finishing part last Thursday. We did a question by Susan Hardy, and one very interesting issue came up in relationship to her experience, and she was talking about consciousness and personality and the links between them, and how it's been working out for her, and how it's very difficult to describe, but she felt a sense of growing relationship, whatever that is to an individual, is their experience. And this is key. Um, I've often talked about the reality of an engagement with another state. It is often very different from person to person. And that is extremely important to keep in the back of your mind. Often people come up with rules and regulations about what that should look like. And that fits their personality style, and it also fits in relationship to how a person thinks they need to be, um, in terms of how they would, let's say, uh, assess spiritual engagements of any kind. And there are many, 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 many ways to look at this. Um, it continues on. We reflexively, through our past experience with what we've listened to or what we read or how we've thought about things, come up with ideas. And unfortunately or fortunately, those ideas stick with us. And they, we lean on them as if they're on our mind all the time, and they're not. So it's natural to have some responses to how one group thinks or another group of people thinks, philosophy, religions, um, science, whatever level of engagement, yeah, psychological as well, of course, but whatever level of engagement that you're on with life itself, mm, and with your own personality's development, you'll look at things from that quarter, that angle, um, it's always hoped by each and all of us that we can get a little beyond that from time to time just by being curious and wondering about other possibilities, if indeed you can allow yourself to do that. And then if you can't allow yourself to do it, that's just where you are. And many of us have these little places inside of our personality engagements with life where we touch on something that makes some sense to us, and then we hold that. And we can't allow ourselves to go past it for a while, or if we ever do. But if we did, we have this idea that we have to obliterate that past idea, and that's not real. That's just, oh, I don't know what you would call it, just what some people believe you have to do. It's not real. Think about how you got to where you are now, whatever that is. That may help you to realize that it's okay to take, if you a look at something beyond or different than, so that you can broaden out how you see things. This is not so easy to do, and I'm not saying it is. And if you can do that just a little bit, wonder how something sits with you. It may not sit well with you. It may sit well with you. Both of those dilemmas, in a kind of a way, call them that, have an effect on you because you're at least attempting to consider something slightly different. And if you don't, it's fine. You're still living life and engaging with life, trying to be as happy as you possibly can, I would imagine. And perhaps even being curious about why it's necessary not to go beyond a certain way of thinking. And those spots are in all of us, in various things. Susan, after that statement, went on to say, it was so comforting that and this is her experience with that altered state or different state of engaging with something that she might call consciousness or spiritual flow of some kind. I wondered if it's so comforting that I wondered if it was not bad in any way, but did I construct it all? In other words, there is still a vulnerability around going beyond, just beyond the experience that you've had before, and whether it's a makeup. Oh, that can't be true. I'm putting words in Susan's mouth, and I apologize for that. But it's not uncommon to have this particular kind of thought and concern that you might be imagining something. Because in our natural world, as it is now, our norms dictate that there are rules. If you perceive this, or this, you can go into the DSM-4 or 5 and look up the possibility that you might be ill in some way. It is normal then to be curious and wonder about things that are different for you. Because in a kind of our culture, we're trained to be as normally fitting as we possibly can be. And normally fitting has many different definitions based on who you're engaging with and who you're talking to. Try that for the next 100 people you meet and see that they don't always agree with you or you're not always in agreement with how they see the world. So learning that that's okay. And that's often called in some people's verbiage a little bit of compassion for yourself and others. And realize that trusting your experience is really easy when it's similar to other people. When it's not, it's a little harder because you have this background of how you have to be this way or that way. Keep it in your mind because it's part of the equation that you're involved with in relationship to engaging with life. If you cut it really to the five senses, or rather than six senses, as many people talk about, then you start with tasting food or smelling your environment or hearing how a person speaks and seeing how they are engaging. And then you add your own defined relationship with how life is relative to your own experience, and you come up with a response, but relative to your own relationship with how you function or believe you do, because in fact, you do not always function the same way all the time. You're a human being, and there's a variance there. You come up under different circumstances, you have certain inner responses, and they bother you, and external responses, and they may or may not bother you depending on the scenario. And you're trying to make sense of you and trying to be okay. And trust the sense making you're making for a time so you can include that in the mix of a broadening personality. At least you know that under these circumstances, this reply seems to be reflexively there all the time. And that is fairly clear to most of us, but we don't spend an awful lot of time looking at it. Broadening out your perception brings up those issues in a clearer way that allows you to be curious and wonder about them, but they don't have to define your life only. You have a mind. You have the possibility of wondering and noticing that they have an effect on you that's very strong, and you trust that. But sometimes you can trust a remake, check it out, and wonder whether you can evaluate something broader or differently than what is natural to you. And sometimes that's very hard for us to do. It doesn't mean we're bad or good or right or wrong if we don't do it or we do it. It just means we're a part of a system. And I'm not talking necessarily culture, I'm talking about an engaging system within us that allows us to basically talk to ourselves or engage with ourselves in a particular way and form some causal response that we think must be valuable and in fact may not be as valuable as we think. Learning how to respect the fact that you're learning how to trust beyond your normal trust level. Trust meaning, is this of value? Is this even real? If you perceive consistently beyond what you could perceive before, it's an added experience to what you had before. It begins to slowly be included in your relationship with your perception related to the senses that you've been able to stimulate. Then the next thing is looking not to be as judgmental or as harsh, maybe, as one could say they tended to be, based on the defense of how you normally function with the world. This is not so simple as all of us human beings get to know very often. But we have, if we're not used to doing that, then it's even harder. We come up with a response and then we protect it because we're afraid. There's a fear in there that will interrupt our previous negotiations as a personality with the world. And this is not uncommon, and neither is it bad or good. It's just what happens in us. And we are wonderful human beings, and we're trying to learn after adulthood how to do something slightly different. None of us get it perfect. None of us. But we try to give ourselves a chance to allow an understanding beyond what we've had before. It adjusts some of the meanings or the ways that we have of making sense of how things should be, could be, or are. Now, I hope that helps in terms of trust. Susan, just a bit. I apologize. I can only explain things in the terms that I'm familiar with in relationship to how I see the world. I realize interpretation is what we all lean on, often so quickly. We respond so quickly. And then we read our responses and then come up with some relatively valid way of seeing the world or people just based on our responses. So we're protecting also our responses because they're a part of our experience. And this is what we legitimately do because we don't have any other way to do it. Well, there are other ways. Well, we could sit down with a piece of paper and check out the old Benjamin Franklin methodology of this is the good things about this is the bad things about this, and count the numbers and 14 to 13, therefore this is not good, based on that, or this is really good based on 14 to 13. They compete together. This is a method of making up your mind about things, but it's not necessarily better. It's just a method. And we all have methods that we engage with in relationship to life. And they're not necessarily better or worse than anybody else's, but they are ours. And where the growth occurs is broadening out and trying to understand differently and being able to listen a little bit better rather than assessing first or assessing as soon as we hear something. This is not a negative way to do things. It's, there's another idea in our culture that if you can spit out an answer faster than everybody else, you're much superior to everybody else. The problem is, it may not be true. And you'll never see it. Because that's what you've learned to maintain how valuable you are. And you don't want to devalue your methodology. So you won't trust an adjustment in that as much. So yeah, you may work that through or may keep that till you're 105 or more, depending on whether you believe you'll live to that age or not. Sometimes it's a personal sense of humor where you can begin to laugh at how you're cultivating things that might be helpful. But the person who has to figure it out is you, me, individuals who are okay with trying to figure something out. May not be able to figure it out. You can't always figure stuff out, but you come up with an opinion. And opinions are opinions, and they're worthy of having, even though they may not be perfectly right or wrong. They're usually somewhere on a continuum between outrageously nonsensical to tremendously idealistically perfect, and a whole list of thousands of different other ones. And if you're looking at 8 billion people in the world, then 8 billion other opinions for whatever purposes you believe you need to have them. So that's not a negative thing. It's what happens. It's how we are. Susan Alcott has a level of vulnerability along the same line relative to being curious. Am I simply imagining what is going on? It's a good question. You have to ask these questions. Sometimes they're very difficult questions to ask. If you ask a whole bunch of people who don't have experience in whatever experiences you have, they will say you're imagining it because that will protect them in their way. They're just doing them. There's no negation in that. Then, but that makes you feel like you're not doing the right thing or having some valuable experience. So you have to allow yourself within you to be okay with your experience and try to understand what that's about. That will help you broaden out your way of thinking. The same would be true of those folks that may have an opinion that I just mentioned. At some point in their life, they may have an experience that they can't explain. How they deal with that will be them making sense of things or not making sense of things internally themselves. This is the nature of the human being. So let's talk about Susan's question for a second. Sue asks, can all centers perform the pump involuntarily? I would say yes, but boy, that is very, very subtle. In this case, let's see, she says, you have taught us to do this consciously using our necks. And I did that because you hardly need to move once you feel that or are aware of that flow. You hardly need to move your head to have the energy be stimulated in a movement from that buttock area or tailbone area all the way up to the top of the head and around your body. That's the reason why I did that. It's not very complicated. Some people use their whole body to do this. And for me, that takes away, it's not a negative thing that they're doing, but it takes away from your ability to watch and perceive around you that you've been practicing. That's all. If you want to do it any other way, you can do it whatever which way. You are the one who's engaging with an experience of some kind related to energy or flow around the body and in and through the body. More than once, both of my eyes, Sue says, when closed, repeatedly moved upwards, then down, similar in motion to what we do with our necks. This can happen. You may feel literally a reflexive pull, literally up towards this part of the brow, and uh, and then in a kind of a way, the eyes pulling downward. It's possible. I then felt energy move up my forehead. You're stronger in the front. I would agree that's quite possible. Up the forward towards this region right here, she says, in a kind of triangular shape. Here's the base, the two eyes, and if they go up, they'll tend to move in this direction, roughly. It's a bit of a triangle. The apex reaches the hairline right here, and general flow briefly continued, meaning continued to flow. In both cases, this seems spontaneous, although now that I have experienced it, am I simply imagining it? You hear it. It's the same question that Susan Hardy is basically asking. Is it real, these things? Yeah, it is. I can say this with no problem. If you experience these kinds of things, then you know for sure each and every person that has experiences, these experiences may be slightly different. Our personalities and how we tune into what we look at and how we see things and how we make sense of them are all slightly different. Yeah, there's groupings of people and how they see things, and they begin to say, well, this is more right than some other way of seeing things. I'm not a great prescriber to that particular concept. If you wish to be, go ahead. Because I've noticed over the years that many people have many things occur that are slightly different. Everyone's personality is slightly different. Yes, they try and there's a bit of conformity there for sure, whether it's broad conformity or narrow conformity. Is that mainly so that we can engage and talk to each other and make sense of each other and coordinate various ways of talking and acting that make some sense to us. This is virtually how life is in large groups, cities, and countries. Smaller groups of people who know each other, friends, whatever, however that may be, and you set up certain ways of feeling comfortable with each other. And out of that, you attempt to make some general sense of each other with a little bit of, at least an attempt to be a little bit flexible so that others will be flexible with you. When you're involved with something that's a little bit different, for example, perceiving energy around you is slightly different. A lot of people talk about they perceive stuff, but they don't necessarily perceive it. And that's why these questions come up half the time, because if they do say they perceive it, then what begins to happen is, since nobody can really prove it or disprove it, then you build a kind of personalized system around you, like a personality, but augmented by what one should be like and valued if you're involved with a certain kind of thinking or a certain kind of perceiving. In this kind of orientation, there's a really interesting thing that I tend to think is of value. Maybe it doesn't make sense to you, but I'll try it out. If you're honest with yourself inside, the best you can be, not externally, inside, talking to you, and you're trying to make some sense of something, especially if you're involved with an experience of some kind like this, you'll begin to notice that it will occur more than once. Yes, that's true. It could be anything. It could be self-hypnosis, actually. But everything that a personality does is on that realm. If you reflexively need to do something to make you feel better, then you're telling yourself, better do that because you'll feel better. And this is the nature of constructing a personality, really. Or, well, if I get into, well, if it's negative, if there's something negative that you consistently do, you're constructing a personality that needs to do that. Somehow you think that's comforting to you. Well, it may be because that's how you were brought up. That might be a lot of stuff. Or how you see the world, all the rest of it. It's possible. So each individual has their own level of idiosyncratic relationship with itself. It doesn't mean it's bad or good. It just means, oh, that's how we are. Some people do more of this rather than that. And you do more reading other than, let's say, woodwork in the back in the shed. Some woodworking shop. Either one are fine. Well, the woodworker might say, well, why are you reading all the time? Why don't you just do something? That is something. But she or he can't see that exactly. But the other person may say, what are you doing making all that stuff? What are you going to do with it? It seems like a waste of time. It just sits around for weeks and you don't do anything with it. But that is the way, the artistic capacity of that individual is tremendously touched. And they feel good doing that. The other person's feeling good doing their reading, whatever it may be. We have these kind of things that we do that help us. And this is very valuable to us. When we're talking about an experience that is slightly different than what one could call the norm, whatever that is, whatever it may be to you and your thinking, then you're broadening out the space around you that relates to a thing that you call your personalizations or your personality engagement. That's just different. From my point of view, there's more. There are more levels of engagement than we're aware of in the world. I can't do that. I can only live it in my way, and that would be my experience. You attempt to live it in your way, but you're nervous about it because it's not something that is touted to be as normal as what normal is touted to be. If you can make sense of that sentence. Try not to devalue anything, but ask questions about it. If you have a reflex to do something different than everybody else, you may want to do something different. You may not just want to be the same as everybody else. But this occurs in reading, in once again, doing woodwork, art, science, any area. but it's a characteristic of your personality. You may want to be different than everybody else. That is not a negative thing. It's often what people think they're involved with. They are very similar to all others, but not in ways that are necessarily only obvious. For example, if somebody steps on your toe and it really hurts, you might yell or pull a toe away. Everybody might do that. Unless you have problems with the nerves in your toes and you never notice that someone stepped on your toe, then all those who don't notice have maybe something wrong with that nervous system that's involved from the toe. And the axons always go up to tell your brain that pain is occurring in your system. If you can accept that as some kind of an example, then what you're looking at is an adventure into something beyond what you currently have noticed. Be okay with that. Try the other stuff too. For example, I'd say to Sue, "Oh, that's quite possible, Sue. Why don't you try also to do it just by moving your head forward and see if that affects your eyes? It may. Move it forward slowly, pull back in the lowest part of your neck, ever so slowly, and let the head come back. And do that about a half a dozen times, 10 or 12 even, and see if your eyes start to shift a bit, even with that movement. That will tell you something that, boy, that both of those things tend to shift my eyes. I wonder what's going on. Then you'll have a different question. Now you'll have a curiosity question. Instead of, oh my God, is this really real? Yeah, many people have experienced these things. But when they begin to experience things like this, many folks start not talking about it because their experiential life becomes different than other people's experiential life. And they're considered strange if they talk too much about this to anybody. So they start engaging by watching inside, seeing where that energy is flowing, wondering why it's only flowing there. Oh, it also flows there. Oh, and it comes up through the face, cuts across the eyes, from throat to here, into this area, and may even cut across the top of the head. And that's the reason why there's bald spots there. No, that's not true. But the experience is yours, or it comes down like this, cuts across, goes around through the head, tries to link these systems up in a manner that relates to an engagement with those external internal systems that we have, called chakras or sephiroth, or call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter. They're like valves. Energy can operate through them on many levels that lie within them. Keep reminding yourself that in the early going, and I would say for the next, maybe, 100,000 years or so, in the early going, maybe less than that, we always think that there's something extra special about it. We've reached and attained that there's some high level of engagement. This is the personality at work again in relationship to the norms that relate to our world, and we're affected by those. In this particular orientation of growing beyond that, there are many levels of engagement, and the only reason why that is important is because each one prepares an individual for the next level. Everything is preparation as opposed to everything is important. Makes the individual personality very important. That is not in relationship to that higher state orientation or spiritual orientation. It's more related to how we do things here on these material structures. And these material structures are acts of development. They link up with higher states. So making your way here is also helpful in relationship to engaging with higher states. I'm not talking about being an idealistic person, perfect person here. I'm just talking about trying to make sense of things, trying to find meaning, caring about people, trying to think about how you can engage with them in a constructive manner. This is very difficult to do because our trained systems are very confrontative and very knock heads all the time. This belief is more important than that belief. And you may have something there, or you may not. May be real, may not be real at all. So when you're engaging with these levels, do your best not to negate your experience, but be curious. Wonder about whether they are repetitive. See if you can see any shift or change in your personality. Sometimes those experiences will broaden out your personality. You'll become a little hyper, or you'll become softer, or you'll become more inquisitive or more fearful, kinder, more respect for people, more compassion, more understanding. And then all of a sudden you'll be fraught with the idea that here you are and you're frustrated again for almost no reason or anything. Just stimulates you because you have been stimulated in a place where you need to soften down a bit so the energy moving into you can be gentled by you. Because, I'll give you an example. Without that, it won't make any sense. I'm sorry, this reminder wants me to set up a different kind of system right over top of mine here. Hang on. Yeah, it's the Flash, Adobe Flash. There you go. Now it's off. That's good. Sorry about that. So I lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. That happens. When you're engaging, though, with new things, you suddenly recognize that something new has been added, and you'll recognize a reflexive reaction to that new thing. Or it maybe affects you in the solar plexus, as an example, which may increase your emotion. If your emotion is solar plexus is connected to the root center, or the emotion is very, very much involved with defending a position in place or a way of being or way of thinking, suddenly you'll have a response because more energy coming in will affect not only the solar plexus, the root center, and those centers make up your personality, the energy that you use to engage with intent and sincerity and intensity to continue the valuing of how you think the world should be, all of us. Then suddenly you realize that you're more intense than you were before, and you're more defended than you were before, and you're concerned and worried that something you may not be able to handle might be there. These are natural tendencies in the world. Everyone has them. If you can pause for a few seconds and say, whoa, what is this about? That's provided you can even notice that they're there. And that is an increase in perception to do so. Because the increase in perception is involved with how your personality works and is, and how you function in the world, not only in other altered states of awareness, but in plain old simple, oh my gosh, what am I doing this for? That doesn't make any sense to me. It's provided you can allow yourself to say those words, because often the self-protectiveness is so strong. It's very difficult to say, why am I acting? What am I afraid of here? What's this about? Learning how to pause and slow things down allows you to be okay with wondering whether, if you try to soften a bit, whether you'll make sense of something better. It won't be as acute as what you find it, whatever it is, to be, because you're softening down and trying to understand why this response is this way. This can be verbal response. It can be physical, facial responses. It can be body language. It can be how you're thinking inside, which telegraphs often in the way you are. You may pull back. You may push forward. You may be more intent or intense on something that is not expressed. Even expressing it softens down something inside of you. Because we are organic in nature. We express organically. It does not mean that we see what we're doing. But I'm talking about as you engage a little deeper, you begin to notice what you're doing more, but you'll miss things. That's the nature of how we function. We miss things. In understanding just a little bit at a time and growing slowly, you begin to realize you're afraid, for example, not to be accepted by others because you think a certain way. And all the time you used to think that if I thought different than everybody, it would mean that I was extra special. That one's normal for a lot of folks. And that happens in business. It happens in partying. It happens in engaging with the most eloquent of subjects and elegance, superior intellectual orientations, all that sort of stuff. It's the nature of how those little things get to be big, and therefore differences get to be considered a little bit possibly nerve-wracking. And there are different conditions for these things to happen. Becoming a little bit willing to allow yourself to be okay. Just seeing them is a big step, and it's okay. Having less judgment with respect to yourself is often very helpful too. I think that is, I apologize for this, I have to throw these things on. What I was saying was stick with it gently, just watch, see what happens, try not to look for solutions. In other words, solutions that are perfectly right, but look at them as if they may happen again and see under what conditions did they happen. Ah, okay. Don't come up with a conclusion. You don't have to. Then watch to see if they happen again. Okay, this is a possibility. It's happened 3 or 4 times. It may happen again. Then you're more comfortable with these differences occurring. Uh, we tend to fuse things together, synthesize based on how we feel comfortable with certain things. Our personality is much more capable than we think. And also, perhaps in a kind of a way, an interesting tool to use for the purpose of broadening out our particular purviews in a relationship in life. It's maybe a thought. So I said, create an ability to observe, try not to analyze as much. Although that analyzing, boy, oh boy, that's how we make our bread and butter for our personality. So let it be, see how it goes. It's hard to let go of something you've practiced diligently, a way of functioning, a way things might be to make things more valued. And we often find out that these ways to make things more valued are just different ways of engaging with life. And it just makes life a little broader slowly. I hope that helps a little bit, Sue. I just make just a comment. Using the throat center, when I said bring your head forward a little bit, pull back on the lowest part of the neck, right near the dowager's hump, right here. Pull back on that, and you're moving your head about this much. That's about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. And you do it slow. It's painstakingly slow. Like that, and then back again. What you're really basically doing is engaging the throat center, which helps that will, personality will, to be more able to see, not only defend. So there is a link up there with the brow center. And the brow center, if a person was for the first time listening to this conversation, God forbid, it would be so difficult for her or him to make sense of these throat center, brow center, all of these things. But these are just valves that have many levels within them, the way I see it. And each and every level of expression relates to the level of expression that the personality can handle. So it's almost like an act of love. Energy comes in so that you can do what you think you need to do to be the best or the great you or the you, whatever you are, and continue it to be that way. We use that flow or energy, let's say intensity, to maintain or try something different or engage with something different. I think that's wonderful, actually. But not everybody's into that. But when you do that, what you're doing is utilizing, learning how, unknown, to use energy for a purpose that's constructive. In our normal world, those energies are used reflexively for purposes that seem to comfort us, yet those purposes and the use of that energy is unknown to us. We don't say, I'm now going to use that energy for this purpose. No, I'm going to go down and I'm going to go and I'm going to buy this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And we go ahead and do it. But we are learning how to do that. And we learned, it's not a big deal. We learned this, how to walk, how to eat food, how to throw it off our little table there, if we had one when we were kids. How to watch our parents go around and scoot around and tell us that's bad and not do it again and the rest of the stuff. We were testing the world and doing things. We haven't changed an awful lot since then. We can also learn how to soften down and still live life and do these things. We don't have to be hyper, but we can. But we're trained to be that way. You have to exert a certain amount of intensity to gain access to a tremendous development of this or that. Or you can calm down and do the same thing, and it seems to work just as well. As long as you keep your focus on what you're doing. So you're cultivating the use of energy at that stage, because this is the stage of development that is normal in our plane, in our worlds. Later on, we may try to utilize that, and we don't know that we are, but if you're angry all the time at a certain, with respect to a certain person, that person is going to notice that they're angry or intense inside. You don't know it, but you have transmitted energy to that person, whether you know it or not. Learning how to soften that down helps you to be more responsible to yourself, because you hurt yourself by doing that. We have lots to learn in this one. This is not very easy for us, because our tendency is to do whatever we do. And no thought is required, or some thought may be required. And when we have a reaction, it's a reaction. We don't even have to practice it. It comes automatically, because it follows the line of defense, the line of engagement that is utilized by you through practice from the time of your birth. Learning to do something slightly different. And you will face the realization that it's difficult for you to do anything other than what you've already practiced. But through time, you can attempt at least to practice doing something slightly differently. If indeed you want to, you might be too proud of what you do without even knowing that that's happening. If you are, then attempt to slow it down so that you can soften you down just a bit. And that gives you then a capacity to allow yourself to at least attempt to soften down a practice that you've become quite efficient at, relative to you, of course. These things are very, very difficult to work with, and perhaps next time when I'm talking about something related to Shitao in England, we'll talk a little bit about how it affects traumatic relationships as well. take care, everybody. We are going to meditate, and we will be meditating for anywhere from 50 minutes to an hour. Please take care. I wish you well. Bye for now. And now we'll just begin to do the balancing and grounding on our own. Good night, everybody.